Astonishment, heartbreak, and deep reflection are the emotions that wash over me after researching and learning about more than 100 Black public figures connected to the harsh blacklists and silent suppressions within the music industry. Hello everyone, we are our Memory Vault, and this is the video 17 Black R&B legends who were blacklisted that you didn't know about. This greatly impacts the cultural legacy we enjoy today, as well as our understanding of the price paid for daring to speak the truth, and it might just leave you stunned. This video is perfect to play while you are resting, enjoying a meal with your family, or doing chores around the house. All the information in this video has been carefully researched and gathered from multiple sources. If there are any oversights, please leave a comment below to help our channel continue to grow. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and ring the notification bell to receive updates on our latest videos. Now let us step right into the stories of our first figures. Marvin Gaye. When mentioning Marvin Gaye, we often remember a prince of soul with love songs that captivated hearts. Yet the greatest but also most tragic turning point of his life was when he decided to shed the image of a commercial star to become a prophet of his era. When the album What's Going On was released in 1971, it was not merely a musical product. It was a profound political indictment of war, injustice, and human suffering. Through the lens of human philosophy, this was the moment an artist chose to protect his soul rather than chase after vain revenue numbers. However, this awakening turned him into the target of a sophisticated, unspoken blacklisting. The executives at Motown, who only wanted him to be a compliant singer of love songs, fiercely opposed the release of the track, deeming it too heavy and lacking commercial appeal. Even though the song later became a historic breakthrough, the management system had already begun erecting invisible barriers around him. Tours were canceled with vague excuses like fearing negative reactions from a segment of the audience, and his subsequent recordings were continuously delayed or harshly edited, stripping away their originality. Marvin once wrote in his diary that he felt suffocated by the invisible hands of the elite. I believe Marvin Gaye's tragedy reflects a heartbreaking truth in an entertainment world rooted in profit, when a Black artist begins to guide community thinking with awakening messages they are deemed a threat. His sorrowful departure later on was not just a family incident, but the inevitable result of a sensitive soul being suppressed for far too long within a system that wanted to strip away his true voice. Marvin Gaye lived and passed on as a symbol of resistance, reminding us that the price of truth is sometimes greater than the halo of fame. Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke possessed an angelic voice that could melt the hardest of hearts. But behind that elegant smile was the sharp intellect of a strategist and a pioneering entrepreneur. In the 1960s, when the majority of Black artists were bound by exploitative contracts, Sam dared to do the unthinkable. He founded SAR Records. He wanted artists to own their copyrights and have complete control over the profits born from their own blood, sweat, and tears. This was a direct challenge to the control system of the music bosses at the time. The retribution meant for him came very quickly and was devastating. When Sam publicly supported Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and used his personal funds to sponsor civil rights marches, he crossed an irredeemable red line. Major radio stations began to systematically reduce the airplay of his music, and important television contracts were suddenly canceled at the last minute without a satisfactory explanation. From a personal perspective, I see Sam Cooke as the most dangerous figure to the system, because he did not just call for freedom through his song "A Change Is Gonna Come," but he executed it through concrete economic actions. His highly mysterious passing at a motel in 1964 remains a massive scar in music history to this day. Although the official conclusion was filled with drama, later research documents reveal that Sam was carrying a portfolio regarding the project to establish a national federation of Black artists on that fateful night. That portfolio permanently disappeared. Did Sam Cooke have to pay with his life for daring to touch a level of power that the elite never wanted to share? He wasn't just placed on a blacklist. He seemed to have been erased while standing at the peak of a revolution in thought, leaving behind a legacy of courage that future generations must still respectfully bow to. The departure of Sam Cooke left a massive void, But the secret about the father of rock and roll in the next position will surely make you completely change your thoughts about the halo of fame. Do not take your eyes off the screen. The truth is still ahead. Ike Turner. Ike Turner is an incredibly complex and highly controversial figure in American music history. No genuine music researcher can deny that he was one of the founding fathers of rock and roll with the recording of Rocket 88 from 1951. He possessed a musical mindset ahead of his time, being the one who forged and shaped countless illustrious musical icons. Yet when the dark corners and mistakes in his private life were exposed, the entertainment system carried out a thorough erasure targeting his name and career. The punishment meant for Ike Turner took the form of complete removal of presence. In the 80s, when he tried to make a comeback, Ike was almost treated as an invisible man in the mainstream music flow. Every documentary project or history book acknowledging his contributions was flatly rejected by broadcasting networks and publishers, citing that his image was unsuitable for community standards. Through an analytical lens, while personal mistakes are something to be condemned, completely wiping out the artistic contributions of a genius is an act of systemic collective punishment. What we need to reflect on here is, was this suppression entirely for moral reasons, or was his name so monumental that people needed an excuse to reclaim the massive legacies he had created? Ike once bitterly shared that he felt permanently condemned and stripped of his right to be recognized as an artist. He closed his life in silence like a ghost in the very temple of art where he had helped lay the bricks. The story of Ike Turner is a sharp reminder of how a system can use a moral cover to completely remove individuals who are no longer within their orbit of control. Rick James. Rick James was the embodiment of rebellion, wildness, and a limitless spirit of freedom. With the super hit Super Freak, he created a global earthquake in the early 80s, but Rick James did not stop at music. He was the one who challenged every standard dictating that a black artist must be obedient and compliant. His bluntness about power money and personal pleasures made television executives and sponsors feel threatened. There are sources recording that after his overly uninhibited performances on primetime television, closed-door meetings were held to find ways to cool down his influence. The blacklisting of Rick James occurred in a sophisticated and calculated manner. His name was gradually pulled from major television shows, and the promotional campaigns for his subsequent musical products had their budgets abnormally slashed. Through the lens of commentary, I perceived that Rick James was put on a blacklist because he was too real a raw truth that ruined the strategy of building clean artist models to attract advertising. The system needed symbols that could be molded, while Rick James was an untamable hurricane. More notably, when Rick James began taking legal action against record labels over copyright issues and financial transparency in 1983. His private life scandals were immediately exploited by the press with heavy frequency. It seems the system skillfully used his personal mistakes to cover up the true nature of an economic war. Rick James once declared that he made art to keep the elite awake at night, and in response, they ensured his career could never find its way back to the top. He became a lesson about the price to pay when an artist dares to live true to their identity and challenges the unspoken rules of a billion-dollar industry. Sly Stone. Sly Stone, the leader of the band. Sly and the Family Stone was not merely a funk artist. He was the one who painted a dream of diversity and unity in the heart of 1960s America. When he stood on stage, audiences saw a wonderful blend of ethnicities and genders, proof that music could dissolve all barriers. However, that very freedom and borderless vision turned him into an outsider in the eyes of the entertainment industry executives of the time. The suppression began to spark when Sly Stone refused to turn himself into an advertising tool for major brands. In 1975, when he publicly rejected a massive sponsorship contract because he did not want his music to be commercially labeled, the system responded with a terrifying silence. A series of major tours were canceled without reason, and the radio stations that once praised him suddenly turned their backs. From an analytical perspective, I believe Sly Stone committed a mistake that the elite would never forgive, asserting autonomy over his own artistic legacy. More tragically, When he appeared on television to speak about discrimination and the underground forces controlling the colors of music, those recordings frequently encountered technical errors or were harshly edited. As Sly withdrew from the stage lights, the media quickly wove the image of a depraved, crazy, and lost artist. But in reality, according to his close friends, he was not crazy. He was simply disconnected by a system that did not want to hear the truth. The fact that he lived his final years in a van in Los Angeles is not just a personal tragedy, but a stern indictment of an industry ready to erase a genius if that person refuses to kneel. If the loneliness of Sly Stone was a tragedy of vision, then the pain of being turned away by the whole world, faced by the artist in the sixth position simply because of a star-crossed marriage, will leave you choking with emotion. Let us delve into this deeply prejudiced hidden corner right now. Bobby Womack. Bobby Womack was one of the most talented artists of the soul music genre, but his career had to bear a massive scar when he decided to marry Barbara Cook, the widow of the legendary Sam Cooke. In the eyes of the public and the music authorities at the time, this was not just a romantic scandal, but an offense against the memory of an icon. But if we look deeper into this picture, we will see a systematic suppression aimed at a man who dared to touch the forbidden zone of interests and legacy. After the wedding, Bobby was immediately fired by a series of record labels. His new album was indefinitely postponed, and his name was crossed off every Sam Cooke memorial event. Through a humanistic perspective, I see that the system used morality as an excuse to punish Bobby because he had touched a massive fortune and the copyright ownership left behind by Sam Cooke. The heads of the major record labels viewed him as a highly dangerous unofficial heir, and they needed to block his influence immediately. Bobby Womack lived for many years in a silent boycott. Contracts were torn up right before signing, and performances were canceled at the last minute with vague excuses. A recording of his heartfelt confession was once cut from the airwaves after just a few seconds when he began to mention being monitored and isolated. Bobby's story teaches us a bitter lesson sometimes. Sincerity in personal feelings is viewed by the system as a challenge to unspoken rules. He was not condemned by the law, but he was imprisoned in a blacklist that was never officially published, simply for loving and living in a way that society did not permit. Betty Wright. Betty Wright, the woman possessing a mesmerizing whistle register voice, is remembered not only through her music, but also for her rare courage in daring to face the dark corners of Hollywood. She once declared that a microphone is not just for singing, but also a tool to speak up for those who dare not speak. That very chivalrous spirit pushed her into unequal confrontations with the most powerful forces in the black entertainment world. In the late 80s, Betty Wright began sharing stories about the abuse and manipulation that young artists had to endure backstage. Even though she did not name names immediately, television programs began refusing to book her. A passionately completed album was suddenly frozen by the record label for no reason. Through the lens of commentary, I perceive this as a form of silent character assassination. When a black woman begins to expose the unspoken rules of power abuse, the system chooses to isolate her to prevent the spread of courage. Betty Wright once recorded in her diary about having her studio access card abruptly revoked. Security personnel said that her name is no longer on the new list. Her career continued, but it was like having to sing in a room with no light. She was punished not because her talent was declining, but because she chose truth over safe silence. The story of Betty Wright reminds mature audiences like us about the value of integrity. Even if pushed out of the halo, her voice still echoes as a reminder that the truth always has a price, and not everyone has the metal to pay it. Billy Paul. Billy Paul, an artist with a romantic soul, created one of the most controversial songs in music history, Let's Make a Baby. While his peers focused on common love themes, Billy Paul chose to sing about the sacredness of creating life. However, in the complex political context of 1976, the message about creating the next generation from a black man was viewed by broadcasting networks and authorities as a highly dangerous, disguised political message. Right after the song's release, radio stations received warnings about morality. In reality, it was a campaign to put Billy Paul on a blacklist. His music was labeled as inappropriate for families, even though its lyrics were as beautiful and pure as a prayer. From a personal viewpoint, I analyzed that the system's fear did not lie in the lyrics, but in the idea of the power and enduring existence of the Black community. They wanted music to be pure entertainment, not an evocation of pride in the future. The climax of the tragedy occurred when Billy Paul arrived for a performance in Chicago. He had changed into his outfit and was ready to step onto the stage, but was then escorted out by security forces because he had been replaced by another artist at the last minute. No one offered an official explanation. The system handled him by allowing his music to be played, but his face was struck from the screens. Billy Paul became a ghost within his very own work. This is a profound lesson in cultural manipulation. The system may accept the product, but they will seek to erase the person who created it if that person dares to carry an ideology beyond their control. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was not merely a singer. He was a genius who converged the sophistication of jazz, the depth of gospel, and the smoothness of soul. People remember him through immortal duets where his voice was like a warm stream comforting the listener's soul. Yet behind those highly healing melodies was a fierce internal battle against the cruel control of the 1970s music industry system. Donny did not just want to sing. He yearned to be recognized as an independent producer, someone with the right to fully master his creations, something the elite of that era considered a challenge to their power. The suppression targeting Donny Hathaway carried the tone of spiritual isolation. When he began demanding transparency in earnings and technical control over his recordings, the bosses began erecting walls of separation. There are documents recording that he used to secretly record meetings with executives as proof of suppression, but the suitcases containing that truth frequently disappeared mysteriously. Through an analytical lens, I see that Donny's tragedy was the tragedy of an overly great intellect imprisoned within an overly narrow mechanism. He was pushed into a state of paranoia, not merely because of pathology, but because in reality, he was surrounded by those who wanted to strip away his artistic soul. His highly mysterious passing in 1979 at a prestigious hotel remains a massive question mark to this day. It was declared a self-release, but his closest confidants still speak of him being followed and having documents stolen right before that fateful night. A bitterly sour detail is that right after his passing, the record label immediately released compilation albums and reaped massive profits from which his family did not receive a fair penny. Donny Hathaway departed while his final recording was still unfinished, leaving a costly lesson about how a system can destroy a genius simply because they dared to demand the right to be their own master. Esther Phillips. Esther Phillips possessed a voice full of weight, a style of singing as if questioning life and praying to destiny. She rose as a musical prodigy, but her entire career was bound by restrictive contracts that she called a prison of black ink. Esther was not put on a blacklist because her voice declined, but because she dared to use the stage to do something the entertainment world feared deeply, reporting the truth about the dark sides of the backstage. The most shocking moment was in 1972 in Harlem, when the music stopped and Esther stood amidst the lights, publicly exposing the abuse she had to endure from her very own manager. The system's immediate reaction was silence and denial. Mainstream newspapers only reported on it superficially, calling them baseless allegations, while music executives began slamming every door in her face. A series of performance invitations and recording sessions were canceled under the pretext that she was a person who talked too much. Through a philosophical lens, I believe Esther Phillips was a victim of the culture of silence, where the truth is considered the enemy of profit. The last 12 years of Esther Phillips's life were 12 years where she was intentionally erased from contemporary music history. She lived in isolation, without copyrights, without protectors. Even journalists who once intended to write about her encountered strange incidents that caused their materials to be destroyed. She passed away in a cramped apartment, but the legacy she left behind is not revenue numbers, but the courage of a woman who dared to face the darkness. Her story reminds us that sometimes people are eliminated not because they are wrong, but because they know too much and dare to recount it all using their own singing voice. Millie Jackson. In a R&B world filled with sweet female artist personas, Millie Jackson appeared like a storm with her bluntness, boldness, and immense power. She was not afraid to sing about intimacy, about control, and about the injustices women had to endure, delivering it with a satirical, defiant attitude. Yet behind that nonchalant exterior, a darkness was silently surrounding her. The entertainment elite of that time had a secret list named artists with high-risk content, and Millie Jackson's name was always at the very top. Millie's tragedy was not a failure in sales, but a suppression in terms of media presence. In 1979, as she prepared to perform a satirical act about the corruption of the entertainment elite, her performance slot was cut at the last minute without explanation. The system had created a soft blacklist where political questions were cut from her interviews, and her albums were refused distribution by major retail chains. My perspective is that the elite feared Millie because she broke the mold of the obedient black woman. They did not want a woman holding a microphone and demanding the right to live true to her identity, even if that seemed vulgar in their eyes. The irony is that later on, the very things Millie Jackson pioneered became highly profitable trends for the music industry, yet she was not credited or granted her deserved profits. She was imprisoned in an intentional oblivion. Millie once bitterly said that people wanted her to shut her mouth, but she chose to survive and witness the truth. Her story is a lesson about the price of being a pioneer. When you go too far beyond the standards of the era and touch upon things people are trying to hide, the system will find a way to bury you in the silence of oblivion. Gene Chandler. Gene Chandler, known by the title Duke of Earl, always appeared with an aristocratic, elegant image and an incredibly authoritative voice. However, beneath that glamorous cape was a lone warrior who dared to stand up against the discriminatory system of the 1960s performance industry. He chose to use his status as a star to demand fairness, and the price he had to pay was isolation for a very long time. The suppression of Gene Chandler carried the nature of punishment for pride. In Alabama, he once flatly canceled a show upon seeing the audience segregated by race, affirming that he would not sing if people of his own skin color were not allowed to sit in the front rows. This action turned him into a rebel in the eyes of white organizers and record labels seeking stability. His name was crossed off major tour posters, and record labels even suggested he change his stage name to sound less ethnic. Through the lens of human life, I see Gene Chandler as a man who fully preserved his dignity even as the system sought to strip away his aristocratic crown. There are records of his master recordings experiencing system errors and disappearing permanently in suspiciously mysterious ways at the studio. Gene did not bow his head. He accepted his career stalling rather than begging to be allowed to sing. The suppression targeting him could not extinguish his voice, but it stripped him of the opportunities to reach the peak that his talent rightfully deserved. Gene Chandler teaches us that a man's value does not lie in the titles bestowed by the world, but lies in whether they dare to stand up straight against discrimination, even if that means having to walk alone in the dark. Fontella Bass. When the melody of the hit Rescue Me rings out, the whole world seems to brighten up by the energy and desire for freedom in the voice of Fontella Bass. Yet behind the resounding success of a song that became a symbol of the 1960s lies a highly bitter tragedy of intellectual property theft. Fontella was not just the performer. She was the one who created the soul defining the signature rescue style in the studio those days. However, in all legal documents regarding copyrights, the name Fontella Bass was cruelly erased, replaced by unfamiliar names that had never even been present when the recording was shaped. Through the lens of human analysis, I believe Fontella's tragedy is proof of the injustice of the artistic management system of the time. The artist was honored on stage, but treated as invisible before profitable contracts. She signed clauses without having the time to fully understand their complexities, only to find that just 48 hours later, her ownership over her own spiritual child was permanently gone. When Fontella tried to reclaim justice from Chess Records, their reaction was not dialogue, but a silent suppression. Entire tours were canceled, television programs no longer introduced her name, and they turned her into a ghost, standing behind her very own song. The subsequent career of Fontella Bass consisted of years where she retreated to the sanctuary, where singing is not weighed and measured by numbers. She once said that people can steal a song, but they cannot steal the pain she carries. Her story is an expensive lesson for us about protecting the value of our own labor. The suppression aimed at her not only took away money, but also attempted to strip away the very identity of an artist, turning her into a mysterious guest vocalist instead of a true star. Syl Johnson. Syl Johnson possessed a voice full of the heavy weight of blues and soul music, but he is also known as the rare artist who dared to stand alone to challenge a massive music industry system. With the hit "Is It Because I'm Black?", he did not just sing about discrimination, he directly confronted it through lawsuits lasting decades to reclaim justice for artists whose music was used illegally. It was this never-surrender spirit that made him a thorn in the eyes of the elite, placing him on the list of artists who should not appear. The system punished Syl Johnson by erasing his presence from the mainstream media flow. Documentaries about him experienced inexplicable data errors. Interviews were canceled at the last minute, and his albums were pushed into the darkest corners of the archives. I believe the bosses feared Syl because he was the bookkeeper, the one who clearly understood the true value of the soul rhythms they were profiting from every day. They wanted the world to believe he had disappeared. Some record label representatives even casually answered the press that we thought he had passed away as a way to legitimize the unauthorized use of his music. But Syl Johnson never stopped. Despite being suppressed, he diligently kept records and fought until the final years of his life. Whenever later hip-hop artists sampled his melodies, it served as a reminder that a person's artistic legacy cannot be erased by blacklists. The story of Syl Johnson teaches us a philosophy about steadfastness. Sometimes the reward for struggling is not immediate money, but preserving the truth for future generations, even if the price to pay is loneliness amidst a system always trying to bury the records of justice. Ann Peebles. Ann Peebles. The woman who made history with "I Can't Stand the Rain" is the embodiment of authenticity and spiritual depth. She did not need flashy choreography or media gimmicks. She only needed music and the truth. Yet it was her very refusal to change her essence to chase market trends in the early 80s that caused her to be gradually eliminated by the music industry. The bosses wanted her to cut her hair short and change her style to hollow dance music to be more marketable, but Ann flatly refused with an immortal declaration, "I do not change my skin to survive." The suppression targeting Ann Peebles carried the nature of deliberate replacement. When she refused to compromise, her albums were suspended and her performances had their personnel changed midway. There were even recording sessions she was in the middle of where executives secretly replaced the entire technical crew and brought in a younger singer to overwrite her creations. Through an analytical lens, I see that the system did not accept a black woman with independent thinking who remained steadfast to her identity. They viewed her integrity as obsolescence and punished her by pushing her toward the darkness of oblivion. Ann Peebles chose to return to Memphis, cutting off contact with those who wanted to mold her into a commercial doll. Without a word of complaint, she quietly preserved her voice and her soul in peace. Her story is a profound lesson for us about maintaining identity. The halo may go out, but the pride of a genuine artist will shine forever. She was removed not because she was weak, but because she was too strong to be bent into mediocre molds. Marlena Shaw. Marlena Shaw is famous for the hit "California Soul," a song full of freedom and allure. However, she was also the victim of a highly sophisticated media suppression after daring to speak up to demand the rights to her personal image. The tragedy began when she discovered a major brand used her voice in a commercial, but replaced her face with another model to fit their visual strategy. Marlena angrily declared, "If you don't want my face, then don't use my voice to sell your products." That stern declaration immediately put her name on the list of artists unsuitable for public relations strategies. A series of summer performances were canceled simultaneously, and her old albums were recalled from distribution systems under the pretext of restructuring. I observe that the suppression of Marlena Shaw is a typical example of how the system wants to strip an artist of their right to presence. They wanted her music, but they did not want the real person, the real opinions, and her real face. Marlena Shaw lived and sang like someone who could never be edited. Despite being turned away by the mainstream media, she persistently raised her voice until she passed away in 2023. She never apologized for demanding respect for her identity. Her story reminds mature audiences that a person's prestige lies in daring to stand up and protect their image, even if that means being pushed out of lucrative contracts. She departed in silence, but her soul was never permanently imprisoned in the edited versions of the world. Linda Jones. Closing the list of legends obscured in the shadows of suppression is Linda Jones, who was dubbed to possess the voice of an angel with mesmerizing ballads. However, her sudden passing in 1971 was not merely a health incident. Through the lens of industry insiders, it was the consequence of a smoldering conflict between artistic self-esteem and the greed of the management system. Linda Jones was not just a victim of illness. She was a victim of a silent blacklist erected the very moment she dared to put pen to paper and write on her contract the words, "No voice for silence." In the final years of her career, Linda rejected a lucrative contract from a major record label because there she would be forced to give up her intellectual property rights and the right to be credited in her very own works. This resistance triggered a cruel isolation campaign. A series of tours vanished, and radio stations in New Jersey suddenly received orders to reduce the frequency of her music. From a humanistic perspective, I see that Linda Jones's tragedy lay in the fact that she chose to hold on to her dignity in an era where submission was considered the only key to survival. She was pushed into makeshift recording studios, lacking equipment, where she took her last breath while trying to record a song about the right to be loved in freedom. The strange disappearance of her final demo recordings and the fact that the involved audio engineers suddenly received promotions at the very record label she had rejected left a massive question mark regarding fairness. Linda Jones passed away at a very young age, but the legacy she left behind is an awakening bell about the cruelty of the entertainment world toward those who dare to say no. She was put on a blacklist not because she failed, but because she was too resilient. Her story reminds us that the halo can be extinguished by calculation, but the singing voice of a righteous soul will always find a way to echo in the hearts of those who truly know how to listen, even if that artist has permanently chosen silence. The journey through the lives of these 17 forgotten legends has come to a close, reminding us of the immense value of courage and the heavy price of authenticity. We hope this video has brought you a more profound perspective on human life, as well as a deeper appreciation for true artistic legacies. We respectfully wish you relaxing, warm, and entirely joyful moments surrounded by your beloved family. Please do not forget to support us by hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and turning on the notification bell so we can continue to uncover untold historical stories together with our memory vault. Goodbye, and we look forward to seeing you again.